I want to talk about how to prepare properly for a government investigation. Recently, I filmed a YouTube short video about a physician in New York who called me about 6 weeks ago. And he watched our interview with federal judges. And he said, I think I should begin to do what the federal judges suggest I do. I said, I agree. He then called today to tell me he's getting sentenced tomorrow. And he's scared because he hasn't reviewed his sentencing memorandum. He has no idea what he's going to say. He inquired about role playing with the lawyer in advance of the sentencing, and the lawyer said, just show up. It's going to go great. And he is freaked out. It's one thing to know what to do, it's another thing to implement it, which brings me to my good friend, former client, mentor to me, Dr. Nate Schott, who reached out many years ago after watching these judge videos as well. So let's just free flow it, Nate. Welcome back. Talk about how you began to prepare when you saw your name versus the United States of America.
Oh gosh, thank you so much, Justin, for having me. And I'm glad to be back. And, I really see it the other way around, but you're so kind to have the nice words about me. What I really look at, and I get to be involved in some of this, talking to people getting ready for stuff like this, is I'll never forget when I saw United States of America versus Richard and Schott. And it's not just like there's an elephant on your chest, but it truly is, in my opinion, the greatest superpower the world has known versus one person. And that just took me back. I mean, it put me into a depression, but a depression of more anxiety, hypervigilance, not knowing where to go or what to do. Of course, speaking to my lawyers, and yet the lawyers could only give me so much because they were doing their job. However, we know that 97% of people that go through an investigation are going to not come through it without being guilty. So, I mean, the government's already done their work. And that was
What's
something,
in
go ahead.
No, finish. And I have a thought. Finish.
No,
Forgive
but
me.
the government's already done their work. And I think that before you know that, you just don't have anywhere to go. And the people that are giving you advice, 99.9%, they've never been through it. And when you go through it, you need somebody to be able to talk to. And that was where I reached out to you and found that.
What's interesting is a lot of people think they're early. In a couple of weeks, I'm going to interview the former FBI agent that worked my case, Paul Bertrand. And you'll hear him say, when we see your name and we begin to investigate, we're in the bottom of the eighth inning. So many people are like, hey, I think I did something wrong. I'm a target. It's early. I'm going to wait. It's late. You can take that from a former FBI agent, or you can take it from somebody who might want to help you, but doesn't really understand what they're talking about. In the case earlier, I mentioned a doctor whose lawyer just didn't want to invest the time to prepare, kind of gave him the blow off, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
In your case, I remember our first call. I was actually on the way to a Dodger game with my dad. You called from Tennessee.
Yep.
And you're like, hey, I like my lawyers and they're supporting this, right?
Yep.
But I know that I need to do more. So talk about what more meant and how you felt you could influence what is a cynical judge. And also, you're a physician and held to a higher standard.
Yeah. And, I looked at that as more because I had been watching your videos, which I was so grateful that you had just put out for free, all over YouTube, and even comparing you to other people. But I love the professionalism. I liked what you talked about, the way you presented it. But what I saw was it was almost like they were just helping me get to the prison door. And what you offered more is really what was going to happen after I got there, but also how could I really mitigate, myself and be better prepared for sentencing and come with a lower sentence? Because if you remember, I had already signed my plea when I came to you. And I didn't know how long that was going to take. Well, little did I know. I mean, from the time I signed it until I actually got sentenced was 7 months. So, I mean, there was a lot that went into it. And even before that, I signed my plea, but I had to enter my guilty plea. And that was about 60 days or 45 days after I signed that plea. So there was a lot of work that we had to do. And I was so glad that I found you, because the time between that to getting, sentenced, you helped me do so many things that, as you know, I ended up getting a 33-month sentence, but I was out in 10 months. And I really put that back to what you guys did and what your team did. I mean, without that, I love my lawyers. I have great lawyers, but yet without the preparation that went into it, with how to put the story to the judge so they could really see and understand me. I wasn't going in to plead my case. I was going in to show who I was and how I had remorse. I never would have looked at that if I hadn't have brought, if I hadn't have not only hired you, but found you. And then you gratefully took me on as a client. So that was, what I saw and what happened. So it was really good.
Something we talk about in our work, and if you're a defendant, wherever you are in the process, you have got to think about people that you can persuade. So you may only spend one time with your judge. If you plead guilty, it can be a magistrate judge and you have a different sentencing judge. You may spend more time with the prosecutor, the FBI agent, the probation officer, your pretrial services officer. So something that we stress through our work, we did a webinar on it recently called Persuasion, about a great book that talks about how you can persuade people who are going to persuade people that have an influence on your life. In other words, Nate, you had a probation interview. You'd already signed the plea agreement.
Yep.
You had yet to have your probation interview, but you knew that interview was going to lead to a report, and that report was going to suggest to a judge how long you should serve in prison. So let's talk about some of those steps of influencing not a judge yet, but influencing that probation officer and how that ultimate report influenced your sentencing. Let's talk about that.
Well, you know, so many people I've talked to don't take that as a big deal, but thankfully for my lawyer and for you, my lawyer was like, this is a really big deal. And what you had taken me through for that and prepared everything and the story, the narrative, and again, telling the truth and taking ownership, but really just laying it all out there, that was a big deal. And I didn't think it was that big of a deal as a lot of people did. And if I hadn't had you around that, my lawyer said it was, but he says, oh, I'll be with you. But I can't tell you the number of times I've heard stories with guys that have gone through and then they reach out to you guys, you know, or aren't working with anybody and said, you know, I thought that was going to be easy. That was terrible. And I was like, well, they have the biggest sway, I think, going into with the judge. Many people don't realize it and they don't take it seriously. And I mean, that was such a big deal. The preparation that went into it, what you helped me write, what you helped us put together, again, all the truth, but yet the way that you did it, because you only get one shot at this. I didn't see that probation officer again. I mean, that was the only time I saw her. And her report went to the judge. And little did I know how important that really was, because, you know, I ran into my judge in an airport, because I consult now and consult back to healthcare on compliance and help practices grow and things like that, and especially dental offices. But, you know, I went up to him and I said, you know, thank you, because it wasn't thank you for doing something less or outside. He didn't do that. But he looked at me and says, you know, I really believed you. You had a good story. He said, and he said, I felt it was true and it reflected who you were. He said, you know, I still look back, as he said, it didn't make sense what happened and what you did. And I wasn't there to plead the case again, but he just said, I believed you, and I was remorseful. And that was something that you also said, as we might get into further in this interview, though, about really understanding and accepting responsibility, because I fought that, as a lot of us do. I mean, we think, I didn't do it, I didn't have intent. Well, fraud, you don't have to have intent. I mean, it's fraud, and you're going to go to prison if that's what they find out.
So when we talk about preparing for the probation interview, this is a vital takeaway for defendants. We interview judges for a reason, and Judge Bennett had sentenced more than 4,000 defendants, and he did empirical studies with judges that summarize what defendants should do. So in that interview, Michael Santos asked Judge Bennett, do you think it's a good idea to get this case study, as we call it, this life story, to the probation officer? And Judge Bennett said, that is a phenomenal idea, because one, the judge can see that you invested the time to create it well before sentencing. Mm-hmm. Additionally, if you create it today and you lay out some vision of what you'll do moving forward before sentencing, yours was 7 months. That's pretty quick. Yeah. You know, some cases are years. Yeah. So if you lay out a vision and you actually do it, you begin to look authentic, because you're following through on commitments you laid out in this initial version of the case study. But also, it's influencing the probation officer who could make the recommendation. You actually get it into the completed narrative where the judge can see it. And if, God forbid, you go to prison, the case manager can look at the probation report and see that you did it. So for those of you that think it's a 10-minute interview and nothing to worry about, you're mistaken. And I hope this interview compels you to approach this report or interview as the most important interview of your life. Let's transition to sentencing.
Well, that's the other thing too. I loved what you said too. I mean, it is the most important. You think it's little, but they're going to take that interview and they're going to be the one going before that judge with what you had, and they have so much sway because of what you've put down. The other thing is, you've got to be truthful in it, because You've got to be. And that was the one thing, I wasn't ever thinking not to be, but one thing you always said is, Nate, it's your story. I'm not going to make up your story for you. It's your story. Now, you helped me put it out. You showed me the way to do it and the best way to present it. But that was something I think that was so important, because I've run into so many people, even in prison, that, they got hung up with that. They were trying to not tell the truth on things. Little things add up. And if the judge finds that out, you're going to go back in even possibly for more charges. I mean, you can't lie to federal officers or officers of the court. So anyway, I'm grateful for that. So that was really good what you did.
Everyone watching this, whether you work with our team or if you have the skill set to write a 3 or 4,000 word document on your own for stakeholders, it has to have the right message. If there are victims, you identify with victims. What are some lessons you've learned? And the value of that is you hope the judge will take the totality of your life into consideration rather than this out of character conduct. And an exercise I would have gone through with Nate when he reached out to our team is something all of you have to do. Put yourself in the shoes of a prosecutor. So Nate, what is success for a prosecutor? What is a prosecutor's goal? How would you describe it?
To get conviction. They don't care. It's a win. It's not justice. It's a win. And something, since you helped me, I've been able to, as you know, part of my own gratitude is to be able to give back and walk with people that are going through it. And the thing I always see is people say, but it's not right. It's not just. This isn't about justice. That was one of the first things my lawyer said, Schott, he'd say to me, this isn't about being just. This is about if you're going to win or lose, because the government's put money behind this case. And when it gets to a certain point, it flips. And the other thing is, they're about winning. And I mean, my lawyers were too, but you get to a certain point. I broke the law. I didn't intend to do it, but I call it being intentionally unintentional. And I ended up breaking the law. And when I saw it, it was like, wow. And that was something you said to me. I remember talking to you about it. You said, look, you broke the law regardless of what you think, whether you believe it or not. And I had to find down deep, and I really worked through it. And I was like, wow, I did break the law. I didn't pay attention, but I signed a document that I said I would treat the patient. I did not treat the patients. I didn't take care of business the way that I said I was going to. The interesting thing was, it's like if you go 85 miles an hour down the street and you get a ticket, the cop gives you a ticket and it might be $100 or $150, dollars to pay that. But the consequence to breaking the law when you sign a contract with the government, you don't do it, that consequence is going to prison. So, when I realized that, it was like, wow, I then understood I could take responsibility, had to still pay the price. But it's like you look at, there's so many times that we think, oh, it's not serious, or, there's something else I can do to get out of it. No, there's not. And the other thing that I've seen is we're in no place when we're going through that. Our mind is not right. It's so much pressure. When you see the name of the US government versus you, even though you think you're okay, your mind is not thinking right. I needed other help. My lawyers were great, but then having you guys in my corner, it just made a huge difference, because you've not only been through it, but you worked with other people, you'd been working with other people, and you saw what was going to happen. And you were very forthright all the time. I didn't ever have to worry about getting fed something to be said, oh, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. It's like, no, you're going to go to prison, but this is what you're going to do. And we're going to work on now your sentencing so you can get the best possible sentence, so you can look for the best possible outcome. And I feel like I got it.
So let's unpack some of what Nate just said. Put yourself in the shoes of a prosecutor. Someday they may want to become a defense attorney at a big time law firm, run for office, look good on television. And sure, it's also about victims and justice, they would describe. Put yourself in the shoes of your defense attorney. We want you to have the best attorney. I think we sent more than 300 referrals last year to lawyers across the country. Great lawyers, but it doesn't change. They have a vested interest in selling to the judge why you're a candidate for leniency. We want them to do it well. We believe in advocacy, in that you need to invest time and build assets that just do not exist today, and then share them with stakeholders. And if you're able to do that, you're going to be more successful. One other thing before we get into the sentence and life afterwards and what you're doing now. This exercise we encourage defendants to go through. People are going to give a better outcome to people if they have similar or shared values. Think about people with whom you associate in life. They have similar or shared values. Your judges worked very hard to get where they have gotten to, whether you like them or not. Reverse engineer everything they did to become a judge. Discipline, hard work, commitment, integrity, sacrificing of their family to advance their career. Does it make sense if you have had a similar path contributed, built, you've worked hard, to share those same values with a judge, because we think if you do, you're more likely to get a better outcome. Nate, at sentencing, I know they wanted 51 or 63 months. You got less. Give us the sentence length and just some takeaways from that day. I know it was good to get clarity.
Yeah, it was incredible. I remember, you and I spoke about it, but we had done everything. And, I think the big thing is when we wrote, my statement, or we didn't, I wrote it, you wrote it, you helped, I really more edited it. And that's what you guys did so great with it. But understanding that I took responsibility is the biggest thing. And the other thing is, I want to say this before I answer that question. Prosecutors are just doing their job too. They're good people. That's what they do. I mean, if I was a prosecutor, that's the way the system works, fortunately or unfortunately. But yet they're just doing a job. So I see that as part of the thing too. They weren't against me. They were taking care of what they had to take care of. Their families, they have the reputation, they're doing what you say. But I think going through that day, that was really a huge day. I was going in and they asked for 51 months. We ended up coming back and asked for 18 months. And it was interesting because what we presented in that really, and it was sentencing. So many people think I'm going to go plead my case. I remember you telling me, Nate, you're not pleading your case, whether you're guilty or not. You are putting your best foot forward so the judge can get to know another side of you that they're going to paint. So this is about sentencing and how long you're going to be in prison, because it gets up there and you feel like it's a trial. Because the government brings the people that you've quote injured or hurt in front of you and the judge, and it was really wild time in court at that day, because I was like, I don't even know these people. But yet what was happening because of the dental practices and what had happened and what we did not do as practitioners, they brought that up, and I just felt like 2 inches tall. But I remember going through it, and the lawyers shepherded along through it, but all the way through with the plans that you had talked to me about. And then I was able to present who I was. And I was also, took responsibility for it, and really ask for, amends and for forgiveness for the people that I did injure and I did not oversee, as far as just with money coming through and treatment that wasn't done. The judge believed it, but I was also very serious and sincere about it, because I really found, how could I take ownership and what I did? And it was like I broke the law. And when I came up to that, it was interesting. Well, not interesting. I was so glad, because when he came back in, it was like he put it in between the two. I got 33 months. And, even my lawyers were like, that's unheard of with this judge. I mean, he was a fair judge. He was very, but what we did there was, because I think in essence of what you guys helped me do was prepare the story, prepare the narrative. And it's so important. People think they're going to do it themselves, but they're not in any place to do it. And you need help along the way. Because when I got into prison, I remember thinking, man, I'll pay anything to get out a month earlier, 2 months earlier. It's prison. People think they're going to a country club. I went to a federal prison camp. It's not a country club. It's prison. You lose your freedom. Yes, you want to prepare for it. That's what's happened to me. Thank goodness. You talked to me about that going in, Nate. When you go in, start preparing now for being home. And, I'm not even thinking about that the first day I went in. I'm thinking about, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? The bad stories, the good stories. Is it true? Can I trust people? And you find out people you can trust, people you can't. Lay low. You called my wife a couple of times when I was in there just to check on me. And I can't tell you how great that was. I mean, of course we have become friends after this, but before, she'd call me and say, Justin checked in. He wanted me to ask, are you looking forward to it? She'd come to visit me quite a bit. And, am I working on what I'm doing to get out? And that was what not just kept my mind off it, because you're going to come home. You're going to come home. I mean, that's the issue. And that's what you've got to deal with. And, thank goodness that you put that ahead, because coming home now, I get to consult back to the industry. I'm actually, I get to speak at law conferences on compliance, on what it was like for me. I know you did the same thing. I've actually been invited now to speak at the FBI, to one of their groups coming out in April. And, my life is turned into something so much better than I ever dreamed it could. I'm paying back restitution. I've got close to still $800,000 left to pay. I'm chunking that away, but doing the right thing and do the next right thing. And, I can't say enough again for you and what you guys did for me and your whole team. Amazing team. I mean, you wrapped yourself around me, and like I said, we're not in any place to think while we're going through it. I mean, we think we are, but we're not. And then you come out, you're still needing help. And that after support too, you checked on me when I got home, encouraged me, and just kept being a role model. So that's what happened, and that's what I'm doing now.
Let's talk about one final thought. I think part of the success you're having now, because you started early, right?
Mhm.
So people delay, they stall, they don't act, they think they have time. They come to embrace the status quo or just accept this is how my life is going to be
Yep.
for a while. And many look back with a great deal of regret. I could have done more. A lot of people waste their time in prison. They come home, while this is hard. It would not be
Yeah.
as hard had they done more. So let's just spend another minute or two as we wrap up this video talking about the success you're having now. Don't you attribute that back to what you began doing 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 months before you were even sentenced,
Oh yeah, absolutely.
before you
And,
faced
and,
the
and I
sentencing
got
hearing?
to do that. Yeah, absolutely. I got to do that too because I felt like I was in good hands, and you guys were helping me walk through the other stuff. And as you kept telling me, Nate, focus on where you're going to be after. Focus on where you're going to be after. What are you going to, start preparing now because it's not too early. And that helped me tremendously because I looked at that and I thought, what am I going to do? How am I going to deal with it? And you get into prison and everybody's got a story. I mean, everybody's going to do everything when they get out. But if you've kind of got an idea and understand, I still had responsibilities. I had kids at home. I was coming back to, thank goodness my wife stayed with me. My kids were part of my life all the way through it. And yet I even look at that, even if they hadn't have been, I still had to come out and do things because I had obligations. I had obligations to my family. I had obligations to the government, to paying them back, and for breaking the law. And I also had an obligation to myself. I don't want to stay down. I mean, God did not make me, I believe, really to stay down low. I mean, we may be laying down, as I always say, but when you're laying down flat on your back, the only way you can look is up. And when you look up, you got to get up, stand up, and then do the next right thing because it's not going to kill you. I mean, that did not define me. I learned a lot. It defined that I could go through things. And it also taught me what to look at and, how I need to put guardrails up in my own life for things that I need to be careful of in my own decisions. And yet it's behind me, and tomorrow is the person that's ahead of me. And that was what it taught me. What can I prepare for tomorrow? And that was what you helped me see. So that was what I got to do. And you start now.
I guess the last thing I'll say is I encourage people, to the extent they can, to somehow let this really difficult experience. In my case, I broke the law. I did it. I think many people become immersed in this system. It should remain civil, not criminal. I think we send too many people to prison, and Prison
Yeah.
Professors Charitable Corporation is reaching to change that, influence more prison reform, like the First Step Act Michael helped pass. But my point is, somehow let this experience become an asset in your life. And I guess my last thought is, has this, despite the restitution and the prison term, there have been some benefits. Would you say this experience in many ways has become an asset in your
Oh
life?
man,
That's
without
my
a
last
doubt.
question.
Yeah. Thank you. And it's become a big asset. I feel like it's part of my life that has really taken me the chapter I've always looked for. I mean, I really am free. I mean, I came home in COVID, and yet I didn't get out because of COVID. I mean, I got out because of the stuff that we put forward and credits and things like that. But yet I remember coming home and I thought, I'm free. And people were home and they were in their own prison, the prison of their mind, the prison of their soul, the prison we put ourselves in. And I put myself in that prison so many times before that, even without COVID. And, I am really free now. It's really wonderful to be the person that I'm made to be so I can live the way that I'm made to live, and I can, do the things that I'm made to do. And I'm so grateful for it. You and I talked a little bit about gratitude before we got on here. And, if I lose that, it doesn't make for a good day for me. But I'm just grateful to be able to talk about it, to be able to do it, and be able to help other people. So it's great.
I will say the last thing is, a lot of times when I speak with Nate, that's the first thing you'll say. What are you grateful for today? Tell me something good that's happening. So, Nate, I'm grateful that you're in our community. You're my friend, and thank you very much for contributing again to the program. Thank you so much.
Always great to be with you. Thank you, Justin.
Thank you.